Welcome to Concerned Citizens Presents. Concerned Citizens of Laguna Woods is an organization dedicated to peace, economic and social justice, good government, and a clean environment. Every month, we invite an expert to enlighten us on a topic related to our mission. Because Village TV videotapes these presentations, we can share that expertise with a larger audience. We hope you enjoy today's broadcast.
Our program today is, of course, about Medicare Advantage. That's the main topic, my main topic of it. I don't think there's any more important an issue to people who live in Laguna Woods other than Social Security and Medicare. I mean, it just affects all of us. So now we're going to get to our program for today. And as I said before, and I think it's really true, that nothing is more important than Medicare and Social Security to us here in Laguna Woods. And that's what we'll be speaking with today. Now, our speaker, John Bauman, well, he's been entertaining us for 50 years? More than 50 years. 55. First 14, I believe, as a member of Sha-Na-Na, playing that character that he developed, Bowser. We all remember Bowser, right? I mean, they had a TV show, they had cartoons. When he left Sha-Na-Na, he did not leave the entertainment field. He performs solo act. He still does that too, to some extent. But he's done pretty much everything else you can do in show business. He's been a producer, produced TV shows, produced movies, produced 2 documentaries, which actually I've seen them both. One is called The History of Rock and Roll, and the other is The Golden Age of Rock and Roll, which I believe I saw on A&E, and they were both excellent. They really were. He's been an actor in movies, been an actor in TV shows. He produced.
Fair.
He's been a producer. He's basically, I'm missing a few things, I know, but he's basically just about done everything and in showbiz. So I want to make a segue here, because one of the things he did, segue to his what he does currently, his segue is that he was a talk show host on radio. He's also a VJ on VH1, back when we used to watch, they played music. But he was also a talk show host, I believe it was New York City, if I'm not mistaken, on a current affairs radio show, which I guess leads him into what he's doing today. He's also now a political activist. John is he's the president of an organization called Social Security Works PAC, Political Action Committee, which works hand in hand with another organization called Social Security Works. They advocate for not only maintaining Social Security as it is, something that's so important to all of us. I mean, let's face it, how many of us would be able to live this life if it wasn't for Social Security and Medicare? I always tell people, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be eating an In-N-Out burger, I'd be working there. And I don't want to do that. Social Security Works and John's PAC, they work to not only to maintain Social Security, but they work to expand Social Security, make it Medicare, make it better, make it available to more people, make it cheaper. That's basically, one of the things he'll be talking about today. We're talking specifically about that Medicare Advantage, and we all, when we sit down to watch Jeopardy at night, we see the 10 ads from Mutual of Omaha telling not to stick your loved ones with your final expenses. My question is always, why not? But the other half of Medicare Advantage. And it sounds great. Well, it's cheaper. You get more coverage. It covers this. It covers that. You can join a gym or buy food. You can cover your hearing aids, cover your glasses. But what is it? We don't really know what it is. Is it as good as Medicare? Is it better than Medicare? Is it cheaper? Well, we can ask the questions. But let's bring up the guy who can give us the answers. So, John Bauman.
Protect and expand. That's really what it is. It's protect and expand. And that goes for both Social Security and Medicare. And you all know me, many of you I think know me as Bowser. You're getting a different version of me today where sometimes I call this Hamlishing, where I kind of imitate Marvin Hamlish, the late great Marvin Hamlish, because I'm putting my glasses on so I can really see you guys. What you know about me with regard to Bowser, and taking off on what Alan just said, I work very hard to mainly get people elected who are going to be good on senior issues. Because I want every candidate for every office who is going to be good on the issues that affect us as seniors and seniors to be as well. There are quite a few younger people here. On election nights, I want every single one of them to end up doing this. Because can you believe that I've been making a living for over 55 years doing this? God bless America. And yes, I really feel very fortunate to have been able to entertain you guys for a good portion of that time. And in my later years here, I'm kind of doing a give back of doing a lot of work on senior issues specifically because my audience does tend to be older. But like I say, it also applies to younger people. And the most salient points, you know, I decided to make this more of a conversation, and we'll bring you guys in as soon as we can, rather than standing at a podium, you know, for an hour. But what I want you to really think about is the following. That you know I love the music of the 50s and the early 60s, if you're familiar with Sha-Na-Na, and even my later career as Bowser's Rock and Roll Party. But that does not mean that I actually want to return to the 50s or the early 60s, because I do not want to return to a time before Medicare was passed in 1965, because at that time, over 35% of American seniors had incomes below the poverty line. That's an astoundingly high number. And I certainly do not want to return to a time before Social Security was passed in 1935. Because at that time, and just think about this, over 50%, more than 1 out of every 2 of people our age, I'm 76, had incomes below the poverty line. It's a very simple fact that I hope you'll retain, that Social Security and Medicare are the 2 most successful domestic programs in the entire history of the United States of America. And we need to keep them that way. In fact, we actually need to expand them. So that is why I've taken on this role, you know, in my later years and run around all over the country. You know, today is a specifically, precisely nonpartisan event. And these are not really partisan issues. They certainly shouldn't be. You know, they've become increasingly partisan, which, you know, we'll talk about, I think, a little bit, but they shouldn't be. These programs have made a dramatic difference. You know, I don't know about you guys, but, you know, I remember my parents, you know, my father born in 1907 and my mother born in 1909. I remember them casually using the expression, you know, a cliched expression, go into the poorhouse, right? That didn't come out of nowhere. There were such things as poorhouses. And if your kids didn't take you in your later years, that's where you ended up. So, you know, blissfully, this is now an idea of the past. We've achieved a massive degree of independence as older people. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to give it up. Right. So that's why we're here today, to talk about what we at Social Security Works really regard as a very particular threat to Medicare. And this is a very complex topic. So, you know, there are going to be a lot of ins and outs to this, and that's why I want to sort of treat it as more of a conversation. But there are a lot of disadvantages to Medicare Advantage, you know, and this is something that everybody kind of needs to know. It's just a burgeoning thing out there. We're in an election year. This is going to get swallowed up. We've been doing a lot of work with this administration to try to get at fixing some of these things that are problematic for a lot of people. But in doing so, we keep hearing more and more and more from people about the kinds of problems that they're having with their Medicare Advantage plans. Now, some people don't have problems with their Medicare Advantage plans, which is one of the complications. Some people love their Medicare Advantage plans, or what we're really concerned about, think they love their Medicare Advantage plans, and we're a little bit worried about what's going to happen when they actually get sick. And this is the danger lurking. This is really the topic for today, is the difference between when you're well and when you're not, and how your insurance functions for you in either case. There are just too many people out there who find out that their plan isn't really as good as they thought it was when suddenly something actually happens to them health-wise. And we work with, at Social Security Works, I can say this very proudly, Nancy Altman, who founded our organization, we're in Washington, D.C., but I'm out here. Nancy Altman knows more about Social Security than anybody in America, period. She should be Social Security Commissioner. She probably won't be at this point because I think her age-wise she doesn't want to do it anymore. But we work hand in glove with Martin O'Malley, who's the newly appointed commissioner. I don't know if you guys know this, and Martin O'Malley just calls Nancy to ask her questions about Social Security. She's written 4 books. Where she's one of my closest friends. I'm trained by her on Social Security. It's a topic for another day. We will get to Social Security expansion, but we have to deliver a better Congress. But today's topic being Medicare and Medicare Advantage, I'm 100% convinced, the best expert in the country at our disposal, who's a woman named Diane Archer in New York, who founded Just Care, and you can go to justcareusa.org, and you can check out everything that Diane does. Diane has devoted her life really to helping people through their healthcare problems, particularly with regard to Medicare. And Diane has really triggered this dialogue that we're having with the White House, with Congress, with of this burgeoning issue, which is the lurking dangers of Medicare Advantage, and what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about those dangers? Now, let's get a little bit specific about what's going on. Medicare Advantage, which was a George W. Bush era, proposal that got through, it's kind of a step towards the privatization of Medicare, which in and of itself is a dangerous idea. Medicare has 2.5% overhead, and okay, getting personal about it just for myself, because I think this is totally germane. I'm somebody who in the last couple of years has had like a real rash of health problems. Atrial fibrillation, a clip on my mitral valve ultimately, glaucoma, back surgery. I have, and that's within the past like 2 years, I've had a whole bunch of procedures that tried to get me out of AFib with ablations, cardioversions, all kinds of stuff. I have traditional Medicare with a Medigap supplement, right? The old-fashioned way. I've had zero. I've paid zero. I've had 0 problems. Can we see your insurance cards? Give them your insurance cards. UCLA, Cedars, every place, nothing. Really, really, really good personal experiences. So that factors into this somewhat. What are, your own personal experience factors into it. What are the dangers that are lurking in some Medicare Advantage plans? Number 1 is delays and denials, without a doubt. Delays and denials. And you don't run into them until you get sick. So you can be lulled into feeling like everything's great. Medicare Advantage plans can be cheaper, Now, okay, now let's go over into show business for another second. It really drives me personally crazy as somebody who makes it my business to make a study of this stuff. And, I went to Columbia University. I was a really good student. I know I have a pretty good intellect, and I try to use it and apply it to this kind of stuff. No one is ever going to pay me enough to go on television and hawk a bunch of things that I know nothing about. I'm just not going to do it. I did one infomercial once for Time Life for CDs of music of the 50s and the 60s. And the reason I did it was because I made them play me all the stuff that was digitally remastered, and it sounded great, So I'm going, okay, I'll do that. This stuff sounds great. It's a good package. It sounds great. I'm never going the route of Joe Namath and Jimmy Walker, who you see like every minute on television. I think they beat the money or whatever. Hawking, saying, call this phone number. There's obviously some director in there who's telling them, it's like, people really love when you use your hands. Like, use your hands a lot, gesture a lot, because it really makes it seem so every time you turn on the TV for the last couple of years, it's like, you're not getting all the benefits you deserve. Call this phone number and you will get eyeglasses and dentistry and hearing aids, and it'll be cheap and it's going to be great, And there is in some of these plans some truth to that. But it only works when you don't get sick. See, and that's really the catch. Because at the end result, hearing aids and eyeglasses and they're really not that expensive compared to cancer treatments. And when you need cancer treatments, all of a sudden people are often finding from their plans that's like, okay, yeah, we're not paying for that. Right? Yeah, sorry. And you're back in the world of private insurance that we all have lived through before Medicare, where it's a pretty simple equation. You don't have to really think about this that much. The way insurance companies, Medicare is a nonprofit enterprise. Nobody's making money for it, off of it, traditional Medicare. No one is making money off of it. It has a 2.5% overhead. It's really efficient. It's really not complicated. The government runs it, but the government doesn't get between you and your doctor. Now, what I said earlier, which is very important for you guys to absorb, it's traditional Medicare plus a supplement. Medicare has always been this way. Social Security has the same kind of issues. There's a cap on Social Security. It's always been there. I don't want to get off on that topic right now because it'll just be confusing. But the general thing that you probably should understand is that whenever these programs were passed, there was always a compromise, there was always a fight, there were always people in Congress who thought they were socialism, and consequently there were always compromises. In Medicare, one of the compromises that was made was no dental, vision, or hearing. We almost got them last year, but still no dental, vision, or hearing. And probably the biggest compromise was Medicare pays 80% of your expenses. You've got to figure out a way to pay the other 20%. Because if you need hospitalization or you need a lot of prescription drugs, well, that's slightly sideways. But if you need hospitalization or a lot of doctor's fees, the 20% can still amount to a good deal of money. So what we're talking about here is the issue of how you cover all those expenses and what is affordable for you to cover those expenses that have always been there for Medicare. They're not new. What the privatization thrust does is once again put an insurance company between you and your medical care. And I don't think you'll be shocked if I say that insurance company is trying to make money off of you. That's what it's there for, right? So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that they are going to try to figure out how to make money off your medical care, and there's only a couple of ways that they can do it. One is to deny procedures. Another is to delay procedures. Pre-authorizations are a part of it. Prior authorizations, you know, you can't do this until we authorize it. You don't have those problem issues with traditional Medicare, right? Doctor says, you need this, you get it. You know, denials are very, very rare. There's another component to it too, which is which doctors can you see? Right. These are the big ones. You know, there's a bunch of little ones, but these are the big ones. Denials and delays. What is the network like? And you know, a lot of people, you know, 90% of the doctors you can go to see take Medicare, right? My personal opinion, I've been through this myself, had to go to a neurologist, and my internist tried to send me to a guy who doesn't take any insurance at all. I said, I don't even want to see that guy. Why would I? Right, I don't want this guy looking at me. I don't care how good he supposedly is. You know, it's just greed, and he only wants to treat the richest people. Sorry, not interested. Anybody that you want to see takes Medicare, takes traditional Medicare, and will take the supplement. You don't have that same kind of flexibility in the world of Medicare Advantage, unfortunately. You know, it happens a lot. You're never quite sure who's in your network. Your doctor could be in the network today and not tomorrow. There's a lot of turnover. You know, it's just true. It's just true. And here's probably the truest thing of all, as I'm looking at there. You know, it reminds me of Senator Langford during the State of the Union sitting out there going, yeah, that's true, about immigration, because it really was just true. Here's the biggest problem of all. Diane, who I told you about, Diane Archer, says point blank, she is probably the best expert on Medicare in the country, and she says point blank, I cannot read one of these plans and figure out what is going to happen to anybody. They are completely incomprehensible. They're designed to be incomprehensible. The fine print doesn't really do you any good. You just don't know. It's just uncertain. You could sign up for a plan that turns out to be okay, but you have no way of knowing whether it's going to be okay or it's not going to be okay. They're designed not to be transparent. So, in a very real way, the most important thing you can do is try to take the risk out of your life, because it can end up being a matter of life and death. And the approach with less risk is the traditional Medicare with a supplement approach. That is the way that the risk goes out. And you don't worry. You don't have to spend your life worrying, you know, about what actually would happen to me if I get sick. So, you know, this is a big dose of reality, because I feel like a lot of people in this room probably have Medicare Advantage plans, because they're seductive, you know, and guys go on television and say, you're not getting all the benefits you deserve, you know, get some more benefits, here, call this number. And, you know, people do it. There's another wrinkle that has to do with it that actually, in my case, I got really lucky, because 11 years ago, when I turned 65, I called an agent who said, you know, get traditional Medicare with a supplement. You know, this is before I was at Social Security Works. I really knew a lot of stuff. You know, I called her fairly recently and said, okay, I'm now kind of an expert on Medicare, Selena. And, you know, it interests me that you were very emphatic when we signed up. She said, yes, I never recommend Medicare Advantage to anybody, and that costs me money, she said. Because oftentimes the agents who put people in these plans get kickback money from the insurance companies, of course, needless to say. And P.S., let's be realistic about another thing, which is, who do you think how do you think they're paying for Joe Namath and Jimmy Walker to be on television constantly? You know, that's not free either. The way they pay for it is by delaying and denying your care so that they get to keep the money. Because the hard cold reality is we're not in fee-for-service world, you know, like you are in Medicare itself. You're in a world where money gets funneled to companies to run Medicare Advantage programs, and it's a finite amount of money. The way they make money off of you is by keeping as much of that money that got funneled to them as they possibly can. How do they keep as much of the money that got funneled to them from the government as part of Medicare? How do they keep as much of that as they possibly can? By denying you care. It all comes down to the same kind of functioning, where someone is in between you and your medical care, trying to make money, trying to make a buck. And you know, sadly, that's always going to have difficult ramifications. There are also a lot of overpayments. This is another one of sort of the big three things. You know, delays and denials, who's in your network, are you going to be able to see the people you want to see? And the third big thing, which is overpayments. These companies really do get away with, and you know, let me finish that sentence first, and then I'll go to the other thing. These companies really do get away with overcharging Medicare, you know, and Medicare ends up paying it, and it drains money out of traditional Medicare and then makes traditional Medicare less solvent, and then everybody else has to face, how are we going to deal with keeping Medicare solvent, Medicare itself solvent? So that's more of a global problem than it is an individual problem, you know. But the hard cold truth is that there have been, you know, about $1 trillion of overpayments, you know, to these companies, and it's really a lot of money, and it ultimately creates a lot of problems. So that's kind of the thumbnail. What do we do about it is the harder task. You know, what do you do if you get in that situation? You know, which is the hardest thing of all, because sometimes it's not that easy to move from a Medicare Advantage plan to a supplement, and also the supplements aren't cheap, necessarily. Although they're not necessarily bad values. Now, the other thing that I backed off saying a second ago, which is totally germane, is that the same companies that are in one good thing are also in a lousy thing. So it's not like we're sitting here, you know, yes, the CEO of United Healthcare makes an obscene amount of money. You know, this is another reality of life in America, where we all know, and I'm, you know, happy to put it this way because it's just true. One thing about going back to the 50s that would have been a good idea is that for the most part in the 50s, the CEO of a big corporation made about 20 to 30 times the salary of the average employee of that corporation. Right now we're living in a universe, and we have been for a long time, where the CEO of a big company makes 300 to 400 times the salary of an average employee of that big company, and that just seems obscene. So we're all living in this universe where the CEO of Cigna, United Healthcare, you know, pick one, are just And where is that money coming from? It's coming from denying your care. That's where it comes from. It doesn't come from anywhere else. You know, the more they can hang on to, the more the shareholders get, the more stock buybacks get, the more the CEO gets. That's it. And you know, healthcare, I think a lot of us agree, is a right, not a privilege. So, you know, do we really want to continue to live in that universe? Having said that, I'm sitting here in front of you as somebody who has traditional Medicare, which I'm having, and the United Healthcare supplement through AARP. So I'm not sitting here saying to you like, oh, United Healthcare is horrible, because you know, that supplement, when you get in the world of supplements, is pretty good. They have a lot of economies of scale, you know, because of AARP, which, you know, in our world, here's the thing about AARP, they don't really advocate. They've been better lately, but they don't really advocate. We advocate. National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare advocates. Alliance for Retired Americans, which is labor, advocates. We at Social Security Work advocates. AARP is really, you know, doesn't endorse, stays out of a lot of stuff, and you know, our executive director has been known to say, they're an insurance company. They kind of are an insurance company, right? They sell a lot of people insurance. Having said that, they got a lot of people on the docket, and the insurance is pretty reasonable. And the gap insurance, which is the most important thing you need to know about Medigap, and that's the 20%, right? If you're in traditional Medicare, Medicare will pay for 80%, and like I said, my own experience and pretty much everybody I know works great. The 20%, which can run up into a lot of money if you get sick, gets covered in the Medigap policy, right? The supplement, you know, same thing. That supplement is like a good supplement, you know, I have no complaints about the supplement. I have complaints about United Healthcare. People probably have complaints about their Medicare Advantage plans, you know, but that's where you get in the world of like, if we interviewed every person in this room, you know, and we're going to take questions soon, because this is really the hard part where it gets to be your personal question, and I'm not going to be able to answer them. And I'm not the greatest guru, like, you know, I'm telling you, like, Diane is the greatest guru. You know, she really is. But Diane said to me, I said, you should be doing this talk at Laguna Woods today. She's in New York. She said, no, you know what you're talking about. You know everything I know, and I can't answer any of the questions anyway. When somebody says, you know, well, I don't know about my plan, the whole point is there's no way to know about your plan. That's the risk. There's no way to know whether your Humana Medicare Advantage plan is going to end up with you banging on the door, you know, trying to get the health care you need or not. And that's the whole point. That's really the central point, is that you're just safer and you can take the risk out. And it's better also long-term for the program globally, you know, for the rest of the country. You know, for traditional Medicare with a supplement to be buttressed and to stop this trend toward privatization. Very, very important. There's a piano here, which is tempting. But because this is such a serious topic, and it's really such a nightmare, you know, because we can't even give like a simple answer to anything. I'm going to take questions in like 1 second. There's only one other thing I have to say, and I'm going to, you know, that I want to say in this part of it, which is, you know, and this, I do not mean this at all to wander over into, to venture over into anything that's partisan. And I really mean that, because none of this should be partisan. But like I told you, we work with the Alliance for Retired Americans a lot. And I have right here the scorecard of the Alliance for Retired Americans that they put out every year. And they're basically labor, but you know, they really know their stuff. So this scorecard grades every member of Congress, House and Senate, on how they do on issues for seniors. They take 10 issues, they're right in front of me, every year. The following is a list of 10 key votes selected as representative of the votes of critical importance to retirees, taken by the U.S. House of Representatives. So, just as an example, you know, number 3 is veterans health care. You know, the House vote on honoring our PACT Act vote. Number 6, which seems totally germane in this room, Medicare drug negotiation. I hope you guys know by now that in the Inflation Reduction Act, Medicare, for the first time in its entire history, remember this thing of that there were always compromises? So the first time in its entire history, Medicare is now able to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies for 10 drugs. And it's only 10 drugs. There are 10 big drugs that a lot of people take. I'm taking one of them, Eliquis, because of the AFib. It is really expensive, right? Medicare, for the first time ever, since 1965, when it was passed, is able to negotiate to bring down the price of those 10 drugs. And the prices of those 10 drugs are going to come down, and then eventually there's going to be more drugs, and then eventually, because this is the biggest foot in the door in history, it's going to be every drug. And you probably all know about $35 insulin, which so far is also only for seniors. And there was a big effort to try to get it to be for everybody, because it needs to be for everybody, because otherwise people can die. You know? It's going to end up being for everybody, but we got what we could get in the Inflation Reduction Act, right? We got what we could get. We got what could be gotten past 2 senators who were resistant on one side of the aisle, because the people on the other side of the aisle all voted against it. And the reason I'm bringing this up at this time is because that includes your Congress member here. And I think that is really kind of problematic, because I'm just stating this as a fact, that your member of Congress, out of these 10, you know, so the way this works, there are 10 votes that you take, you get 10 points or 10% for each vote that you take that's good for retirees, and you get 0 for each vote that you take that's not good for retirees. So, you know, young Kim, your House member here, who, you know, talks a good game a lot of the time, you know, and tries to sound moderate about things. But the hard cold fact in that first year is that her score from the Alliance for Retired Americans is 20% out of 100. She voted against, you know, both of the things that I just brought up to you. She voted against. And she's not going to come out here and tell you that she voted against Medicare negotiating to bring drug prices down. And by the way, that also included the other really big thing that I don't want to ignore, because I want you to carry this in your heads, you know, also as you go to the polls and just as human beings. I'm very pleased that we can now say next year, 2025, there is going to be a $2,000, there is a $2,000 cap on how much you as an individual have to spend on your prescription drugs. You cannot spend more than $2,000. And that, you know, because they were good and responsible when these bills were passed. The reason there's a little bit of a delay on it is because it's paid for. It was paid for by other things. So You know, it's not one of these things that adds to the deficit. It doesn't do any of that stuff. It's paid for. The consequence was it happens in January, in the year that starts in January of 2025. But that's another great big deal that, you know, like I said to you before, okay, so I'm on Eliquis. Eliquis was costing $74 a month on the drug plan that I had, Medicare Part D, right? Was costing $74 a month. You times that by 12, that's like almost all of the $2,000, you know, it's getting close to all of the $2,000 besides all the other drug expenses that I have. I'm going to be cut off at $2,000, not one more penny. That is a great big deal for people who have medical issues, and that's going to be a lot of people. It's millions of people. So these are really good advancements for humans. And I guess I'm just reporting to you objectively that your member of Congress really did vote against that. And they're still trying to repeal it. You know, there was one presidential candidate last week that said, yeah, I'm for cutting entitlements. Like, and we don't use the word entitlements, by the way, you know, because it's an ugly word. So let's start taking questions about all this stuff.
I've got, hold on, guys, I'll come around to you. Keep your hands up. Wait a minute.
No, I can go 4:15 if you want.
Who's talking? Oh, okay, Barbara.
So let's start now. The only thing.
Barbara gets the first talk.
No, I just wanted to let everybody know we only have about 20 minutes.
No, we're fine.
Oh.
The only thing about the questions is, you know, probably if it's like a really specific question about your plan, like I keep saying, we're probably not going to be able to answer it. Because even if we read the fine print of your plan, you couldn't interpret it well enough to really know what was going to happen. You just have to remember that it really is in the insurance company's interest to deny you, because that way they get to keep the money that they've been given. Which is just like the old private insurance before you had Medicare. You know, Medicare changed the entire landscape for older people in America.
Thank you. You've raised some very interesting points. What I've learned is that a fair number of people in the United States have not saved enough money for retirement. So therefore, it seems to me that they're going to be attracted to the Medicare Advantage plan because it's less expensive. That's one point. The second point
That's
is,
what happens. That
Yes.
is what happens.
right.
And Medicaid, you know, comes in. Medicaid does come in, you know, blissfully. We're at least in a state that took the free Medicaid money. There are still like 11 or 12 states that didn't, you know, and then you're really sort of SOL. But, you know, if your income is low enough, Medicaid does kick in, you know, in this situation that you're
Right.
describing.
And the second point was, if somebody is already on Medicare Advantage, how easy is it, or almost impossible, I don't know, to switch back to regular Medicare if you so wish?
The biggest problem with it, that's the best question you could ask, because it's also one of the things that's true, is that it's not always that easy. Now, by the way, right now, you can still do it until March 31st. Like, there is a window still in here for another 10 days or so, where you could try to switch your plan, and then you can't do it again until the next period. But I asked Diane about this a lot today driving in the car, because I think this is kind of the hardest thing. And she really, because she's always negative about, you know, that it's hard to go back. But it turns out that the core of it being hard to go back really is the expense. You know, so if you can afford to go back, that's the biggest issue. It's that the supplement plans aren't cheap, you know. But the average on the supplement plans is like about $2,500, you know. So it's not astronomical either. You know, but this is, your question is in the exact proper world, which is, can I afford this? Can I afford to take the risk out? And like I said, the actuarial equation, sadly, is the sort of hardest thing to describe and the most disgusting part of it, frankly, is the actuarial equation, which is like, yeah, if we give these suckers, you know, some hearing aids, right? And then if they really get sick, we're going to deny everything. You know, we can get them to sign up for these programs. We can get them to sign up for this stuff because, you know, they're not sick right now. So, you know, and then the other element, and then I'll stop on this, is that, is it, if you're already sick, is it going to be hard for you to get that supplement? Medicare will take you, but is it going to be hard for you to get that supplement? You know, when you're already in the program, in the plan, on regular Medicare with Medigap supplement, they cannot deny you stuff. But if you're already sick when you move over, and that's an issue that was solved in the ACA for non-Medicare people. Remember? Yeah. Pre-existing conditions. But it's not quite solved for Medicare people trying to move back from MA to, so that's a little bit, it's another reason why it's better to move while you're healthy.
I have a real quick question. You say in January of 2025, there will be a $2,000 cap on prescriptions. Is that
For seniors.
For 1 year? Is that
Right.
generic or regular?
Okay, well, in the end result, I believe that the answer to that is that that's the cost. So it depends on that's just the number. So it depends on the drug plan that you have, you know, but I'm not really aware, you know, if your doctor tells you you can't take the generic for some reason, right, then you still have to deal with, you know, I think this is again in the world of actual medical care, where there's nothing between you and your doctor that's going to muck that up. You have the potential of your doctor mucking it up for you, but there better be a good reason. You know, and look, I personally haven't found that to be, I had like a one, I don't know how many people in this room have had that reaction to things. I had one thing that happened, you know, where the generic, I had a reaction to the generic, which actually I ended up getting over, and then the generic was fine. But for a while, I had to take diltiazem. I had to take Thiazac and not diltiazem, you know, for high blood pressure. So that does happen occasionally, but I think $2,000 is $2,000. Yeah. Yeah. Unless someone tells you you must take, you know, I think that's not it's a kind of a red herring issue, I think.
One quick comment and then a question. This is a perfect example of there ain't no free lunch. I wonder, are you aware that the New York Times has written several articles advising people against Advantage and pointing out the reasons why, which are quite similar to what you're talking about here?
This stuff is floating around. I got an article today that is really actually just excellent, that pretty much summarizes what I've been, you know, I've got this stuff on the top of my head now, but yeah, this stuff is going around and it's going around because people are experiencing problems with their Medicare Advantage plans. It's not coming out of nowhere. So, you know, the New York Times has been a little weird, you know, in the past few years, in my opinion, you know, especially on sort of political stuff. But no, there was a really good article at the Times about this. It was really good. You know, there were really good articles roaming around. You can find them. You know, Barbara and I talked a little bit about, okay, should we do a PowerPoint, or should I just sit here and talk, or how should I do this? And you know, I kind of like this better, but I can funnel you. Do you have everybody's email from here? Yeah. I'll funnel you a bunch of stuff that you can read, that pretty much all of which is going to buttress everything that I'm saying. I don't, you know, I really don't think there's all that much disagreement about what this is. It's much more of an issue of what are we going to do about it? How are we going to regulate? You know, see, it really comes down to, so like, what are we really doing on a daily basis, right? You might well ask, because I think it's the fairest question of all. And what we're doing on a daily basis is really trying to figure out within this administration, with them, how to regulate these MA plans. They're probably not going to just go away, you know, because there are too many people on them. And some people think they like them. But they've got to be regulated in some way so that they can't, you know, look, here's a really miserable thought. If the government canceled, and this seems to be fact, if the government canceled the bottom 5% worst performing Medicare Advantage plans, it would save 10,000 lives a year. See, that's really what you're dealing with here. You know, now, part of the problem is you got to figure out which ones are really the worst performing ones. But you know, there seems to be some sense of what that is, and we're trying to get them to step in and do something about this. It's also, I told Barbara this, and I might as well share it with you, even our efforts are going to get a plug pulled on them, you know, fairly soon, because it's an election year, and probably nobody's going to do anything like this in the middle of an election year, because, you know, it'll end up irritating people who think they got great Medicare Advantage plan, you know. It's just, and everybody's distracted. You know, this is a fight that's going to be ongoing. And again, in the world of nonpartisan, you know, we don't care who the administration is. This needs to be done. You know, make no mistake about it, this needs to be done. Now, this administration, it's wrong to say they're unresponsive. They're not unresponsive. They're probably the most responsive on this kind of thing of my entire lifetime, including, you know, even the Obama administration. But it's still not going to be easy to get this done, because this is it's a hard thing to figure out how to do. You know, they're going to have to regulate these plans, and it's going to take probably some legislation on top of it, and then you got to get past all the people who are in the legislatures, you know, who are or may be in the pockets of the insurance lobby. One of the, you know, what are the, you know, pharma? What are the most powerful lobbies in Washington that buy politicians? Oil and gas, pharmaceuticals, insurance. You know, that's where we live. Yes?
You touched on it earlier, and I recently heard a guy from Social Security Works on the radio talking about that Medicare Advantage has overcharged to $140 billion just last year alone.
Yes.
And the fact that they shouldn't be called Medicare anything. They're insurance companies. Right. They're not Medicare. And it's very confusing. And then you say they're giving you the toys and free stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And probably who you heard on the radio was our executive director, Alex Lawson, because this sounds like what Alex would say.
Yes.
Right. Alex fills in for Tom Hartman sometimes, and you know is really an expert in this area too. He's in Montana today, talking to a group called Big Sky 55 Plus, which is the biggest seniors group in Montana, and Montana is, you know, very important in the upcoming election and all that stuff. But again, it's a talk not about electing somebody, it's a talk that's about the policy needs of seniors. And that's what we're talking about. Yeah, look, we can take a couple more. I'm going to throw in, just for fun, just because it's a nice group and it's a fairly big group. Right at the end, I'm going to throw in a little bit of Bowser. So, yeah, just because it'll be fun. Okay, way in the back.
I have a question.
Yes.
Last year, sometimes in October, I talked to United Healthcare. That lady spent half an hour with me. Found out, for my age, they were asking me to pay over $200 a month. My wife, younger than me, was $129. There is no guarantee. That will keep on increasing as my age advances. So I asked, what about drugs? You have to pay extra for the drugs. Now, what is the benefit of United Healthcare? I mean, how do you get benefit? I don't understand.
There is no real benefit.
So you still pay,
I mean, if you're asking us, you know, we would tell you going to Medicare for all in the end result is probably going to yield a better result. But you know, in all fairness, when you look at other countries, you know, Medicare for all also has issues that have to be resolved. You know, you can wait a long time, all the standard stuff that you know about Medicare for all. But the main thing is we don't have the political will to go to Medicare for all yet. We're not even close to that political will. You're looking at a House of Representatives right now that you've got a better chance of getting hit by lightning than you could ever get a positive vote on well, anything, right? Much less Medicare for all. You're right. Right, you can hardly get a vote on anything. But you know, we are trying to do the best we can with the system that we have and make it the safest for the most people with the system that we have. United Healthcare is not evil per se. It's like every other corporation. It's trying to make money and pay the CEO, you know, so maybe that is evil, you know, but that's a judgment, that's a different kind of judgment to make. And I'm not touting them over any other company by any means. The only thing I'm telling you, you know, that I did say, that I would probably say again, is that I think there are some economies of scale because of the AARP connection that makes that supplement a very popular one. Yes?
Hey, thanks so much for this talk, John. Great job. You alluded to a couple of the things that I want to just raise. The big picture, vested interests, big money, special interests, versus a lot of people with diffuse but not focused interest. And over, say, looking back 40 years, the tension between single payer, Medicare for all.
Right.
Come on, Wendy, I'm going to ask you a question. I know that. And on the other hand, total privatization.
Right.
So it seems to me that we're here kind of in the middle. How do you look at it as, you know, in the long run, single payer versus total privatization?
Right, good question, and you know, I do think we're in the transition. I really do think we're in the transition. I think ultimately there will be because healthcare really is a right and not a privilege, and because we all know that at the end of the day, it's the least efficient, stupidest way to do it. But if something really goes wrong with you and you don't have the insurance, you're going to go to the emergency room anyway, and they're not going to throw you out. You may have to wait there, you know, until health freezes over, but they're not going to throw you out. So one way or another, we have already stated in this country that healthcare is a right and not a privilege. There are forces that are really trying to turn it into a privilege and not a right. They've always been there and they're always going to be there. But do I think we're really on the road to recognizing that it's a right and not a privilege and ultimately going to a place where everyone is covered? Yes, we are on that road. We have been consistently expanding. We just have to not go backwards. We have to not elect people who are going to take us backwards. That's the craziest idea of all, because we've already been to all those other lousy places. You know, this place is better. The ACA, you know, Obamacare, it's better. It's just better. There are a lot more people covered. It's just better. It had, again, it took a while to kick in. That was a little bit of an issue, you know, and there were electoral